We've had a very, I think, intensive 2 days of discussion. And I don't know about you, but I've really been overwhelmed by the quality of engagement, by the openness, by the respect, by the trust, and by the willingness to bring forward ideas that may not necessarily be accepted by all, but I think help us interpret that data that we were presented with yesterday morning. We've attempted to move over these 2 days from anxiety to agency. And I think that's the journey that Australia needs to be on if we're going to be ready and resilient and face up to the challenges and the opportunities of this period of our history. But that's enough from me. I'm going to invite each of our 5 panellists to just give us a few minutes of their big takeouts from the 2 days, and they can be analytical observations, they can be ideas about where we go forward. They can also be identifying gaps in the conversation that we've had, because it's no secret that the National Security College has a special reward for the work it's done over the past few years, and that is more work that lies ahead for us, and we hope you'll join us on that. So look, just as a quick introduction, I think a few of our panellists haven't really been introduced to you so much before, so I'm going to go to each of you in turn and offer a few minutes from you. And Yasmin, I'll start with you if you don't mind. Dr. Yasmin Hassan is the Chief of Community Engagement, or the Head of Community Engagement for the Office of the Special Envoy to Combat Islamophobia in Australia. It's a real privilege to have you back, not least because a little secret, not so well known perhaps, is that you're one of our alumni. PhD from the National Security College, and it's fantastic to bring you back to ANU for this. So Yasmin, I'd love to hear a few thoughts from you.
Thanks so much, Rory. Good afternoon, everyone. I prepared some notes. So if we're honest, a lot of what we've heard over the past 2 days sounds right. It sounds thoughtful, measured, and technically sound, and also at times reassuring in a way that should make us uneasy. So let me start with a provocation. What if the patterns we keep describing over the last 2 days, those of erosion of trust, uneven experiences of security, gaps between policy and lived reality, are not anomalies? They are features. Because from where many vulnerable communities sit, the experiences of the last 2 decades hasn't been one of misalignment. It has been one of consistent overexposure to scrutiny and inconsistent access to protection. And that raises a harder question that we haven't been asking ourselves over the past 2 days. Not how do we improve trust, but what exactly are we asking people to trust? Who exactly are we asking people to trust? But let's be clear, trust cannot be engineered through better messaging or even better engagement if the underlying experiences for vulnerable communities don't change. We cannot consult our way out of structural distrust. We cannot community engagement, ironically, even though that's my title, out of our way of policies that are experienced as unequal. So here's the uncomfortable possibility. The issue isn't that communities don't understand the system. It's that they understand it very well. It's just that it's not working for them, and that harm is unevenly distributed. What we haven't asked, and we don't ask, is whether some of that unevenness has been produced by the very frameworks we've been trying to refine over the last 2 days, if not over the last 2 to 3 years. When entire communities are constructed as sites of risk, that doesn't just shape policy. Some of the previous panelists have also shown and discussed that it shapes how individuals experience realities, and it also shapes how individuals experience institutions. So the question isn't just how do we protect vulnerable communities, it is how our own systems contribute to that vulnerability, and perhaps that's some of the work that the NSC will continue to do over the next few years. And then there's the implementation gap. We talk about it as though it's a technical issue. Closing that gap would require more than improving service delivery. It would require confronting the possibility that some policies have produced harm, and not incidentally, but systematically. We've talked about social cohesion as critical infrastructure, but cohesion is not built by asking people to come together around a system that feels uneven. And perhaps one of the most profound contributions I've heard so far over the last 2 days is George Brandis's one, where social cohesion should not be synonymous with multiculturalism and the implications that will have in the future if it continues to remain so. Cohesion is built by people, or when people believe that the system is fair, especially when it is under pressure. Polarisation, as some have discussed already, is not a social phenomenon, but it is in part a policy outcome. Whether it's deliberate or not, it's still an outcome that is felt in the everyday. So where does that leave us? I don't think the answer is to abandon the frameworks we have, but I do think it requires a shift in how honest we are willing to be about them. And it means not just asking, how do we make the system more effective, but who does the system currently work best for and why? It means moving beyond the language of engagement to the practice of agency and accountability. It means being willing to say that some of the approaches, particularly those that have relied heavily on surveillance and suspicion, have costs that we have not yet reckoned with. And until we are willing to confront that directly, we will keep having the same conversations. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I think, Dr. Hassan, we were having conversations, as you know, with Dr. Aftab Malik about ways in which the National Security College can work with the Special Envoy, and we look forward to that as one of our next steps. I'm actually going to go to the other end of the spectrum now. No, not you, Holly, not yet. I'm going to go to Peter first, so you can relax. Peter Willis very recently graduated from ANU as a student of international security. But the reason I'm especially keen to have Peter here today is that he's been heavily involved as a leader in the Australian Crisis Simulation Summit. There are a few other ACSS people here in the room here today, which is, I think, one of the most effective and innovative approaches by young Australians in recent years to prepare a more ready and resilient Australia. Peter, as you know, when your forebears in the ACSS came to the college a few years ago asking for our sponsorship, I didn't believe that the team would pull off such an extraordinary achievement as the Australian Crisis Simulation Summit. I said, come back in 6 months, and you did. And 5 years later, it's a real achievement. So we'd love to hear some thoughts from you, Peter.
Well, thank you, Rory. And what I'm touching on is actually some of the stuff from the ACSS, but as well as in my broader work in policy formulation, actually working directly with ministers. So listening to everyone speak throughout these 2 days, I think one of the most interesting points was made by Senator Patterson, when it was an off comment when he said that politicians have two priorities. It's their party and as well as the people. And when talking with ministers of the ACSS, politicians as well as work, when we talk about policy with them, this is the major priority we're given. And when we're discussing policy, sometimes we get caught up in the technicalities, in the weeds, and it's quite easy to, when you're stuck in all the numbers, in rooms all day with practitioners, and discussing it all. However, as we've seen in consultation, the general public are far more educated than I think we've given them credit to up until this moment. And I think we need to branch out from our focus groups, little echo chambers, and to actually bringing them into the policy discussion and actually informing them on how policy will assist them. And, well, I think we started doing a better job in this. I think this is most notably done through AUKUS was the first one, where although it was defence spending, I think it was framed in the idea of sovereign manufacturing, advanced capabilities, as well as employment within Australia. And it's these type of policies where they don't have a traditional siloed lens. Like if we think back to traditional days of the US, the defence spending, it was more so justified that we need to increase defence for the sake of increasing defence and protecting national security. However, as we come to polycrises, I think we need to start adopting polypolicies. No policy can be adopted in a siloed lens. And while they never do, they have unintended consequences. I think we need to actually start addressing these consequences and instead of having them as unattended, frame them as intended. And I think one of the best examples of this is the 2019 to 2022 federal election for the Labor Party. If you look at the 2019 election, Bill Shorten went to it with a climate promise. Now, this promise was merely framed through the climate lens. And as admirable as it was actually one of the weakest points that came up in focus groups over and over again, and it was attacked, and ultimately one of the reasons why they lost that federal election. Fast forward to 2022, Albanese took an almost identical climate policy to the election, but rather framed it through the lens of the future made in Australia. This lens was higher paid jobs, higher skilled jobs in critical infrastructure, critical minerals, rare earth materials, as well as sovereign capabilities as an energy infrastructure. While it has the same outcome, it was framed to the public in the consequences intended to cause. And this, I mean, we can look at the political climate now, they're still reaping the rewards from this. And now, onto the second part that Senator Patterson mentioned, the party. And I feel this is a part that's often overlooked. And as we see the 2025 federal election, the Labor Party has been restored with the historic majority in the House of Reps and in the Senate. And while this has been applauded for continuity purposes, portfolios remaining the same, as well as having a unified party room, that's 123 caucus members you have to talk with. Now, in a budget that is incredibly finite right now, where 1/3 is already taken up by health, that's aged care, NDIS, and the broader healthcare system, we're left with 123 members of parliament who all need funding, irrespective of their portfolios, for their electorates. They need funding for their constituents. So this pie that we're trying to divide up isn't getting any bigger, but the asks within it are increasing. And on this, I think the NSC has done an amazing job, because what's needed right now to get policy across the line is to emphasise the importance. And I think just reading it, we see the highest we had for preparedness in the survey was 18% for the Australian public feeling the government was prepared for a crisis. Now, politicians have come up here and they've agreed that this is something that needs to be addressed. And then the final point I would say for the party is the work already done with the Parley Friends of National Security. And it's issues such as these where it can sometimes get easy to, like, let's brief the Minister for Home Affairs, let's brief the Minister for Defence, brief the Minister for Defence personnel. However, issues such as these where it's affecting all of Australia, we need not only inter-party support, but also cross-party support. We need discussions with crossbenchers across the political aisle to actually get a joint position, to get a bipartisan support on funding, and to ensure that its actual intended purpose is maximised.
Look, thank you, Peter. And I've noted poly policy. I'm not sure that's going to take off, but I think the spirit of that is very much the spirit where we need to go with integrated policy. So I have noted that down for potential stealing.
What if it's just policy?
Thanks, Holly. So we're going to go to you now, because you are communication is one of your talents. So I think, colleagues, you would have seen, those of you who were on the joining the leadership and community panel earlier today, you would have met Holly Rankin. So Holly, I think your bio describes you as artist and strategist and the executive director of Sentiment, but also acknowledging the great work you've been doing with us at the National Security College. So over to you, Holly. Thank you.
Thank you, Rory. And thank you for my last minute invite to the panel. So got some rough notes here, but I think the report that you and your amazing team have created and the nature of this conference, first timer here, has given us in the room and the nation and leaders of our nation permission to be human. Permission to be human about the problem and also the solution. And the solution is the most critical part. And what I mentioned earlier at the end of our session was that these amazing systems and institutions that we have built are incredible and strong, and they've got us to where we are. But we have lost a lot of humanity within them. We've lost the things that make us human, our adaptability, our agility, our movement, our collaboration, and especially our community. And so how do we make them human again? I think that all of the ideas discussed in across this conference are so encouraging and so exciting. But one of the things that I've picked up is this real willingness, both from the community and the public, but people and leaders and sectors in the room of all different natures, willingness to collaborate and come together in a rapid way, in a creative way, but in a reasonable way. But I think also in an urgent way that perhaps, we are alluding to, but not really saying out loud. And doing this within the lens of a national security context, I think will be really exciting. Something I think about a lot as an Australian and as a human is this idea of being so comfortable that your comfort becomes a threat to your safety. And I think that Australia is at risk of being in that position unless we act on this instinct that we all have and act on the data in real time. We aren't like our friends in Finland and Japan who have a very real, present, immediate, daily threat on their doorstep, but we do need to learn from them and learn from their very far advanced, incredible programs we just heard about, and not sit around for 2 years chewing, eucalyptus leaves, waiting for danger to be right on our doorstep. I think we have incredible partners around the world who have incredible programs, and we need to sit and rapidly listen to them and adopt some of them pretty quickly, I think. And so how does that begin? I think that begins with a few things, but one of the things is the community's asking for agencies and government to come to the table and share more information with them. Having that, having synthesis there will rely on us garnering a sense of shared truths. To get a shared truth where we are operating in a really worrisome digital ecosystem. So the easiest way we can do this is communicating and engaging at scale with the Australian public. And that's some of the work that my team are hoping to do and engage with National Security College on how we really put this research and this evidence into action and start a national conversation about national security in a creative and adaptable and a community-first way. So I'm really excited about that. I'm really excited for where you take this knowledge and this research and these amazing people in the room who are all on the same page.
Look, thank you. Thank you, Holly. Lots of ambition and expectation there, no pressure. But thank you. And look, we'll have a slight key change now before we end. I'm going to go to James Rennick. So those of you who managed to break into the studio dialogue on legal preparedness would have met Professor Rennick, who's a very valued and long-time friend and supporter of the National Security College. Also, in a different capacity, of course, a judge of the Federal and Family Court. But Professor James Rennick, it's great to have you with us today.
Thanks, Rory. 3 short points, and they're really summarising what I've heard over the last couple of days. I think the first is this: history, including recent history, suggests that in times of national crisis, exceptional powers and immunities are granted by Parliament to governments and indeed to service providers. And repeatedly people have said, well, either those laws should be in place or exposure drafts should be available, setting out the desired powers so that they can be debated, and importantly, setting out the oversight mechanisms. Are you, for example, going to have the PJSIS as the parliamentary oversight, or are you, as is now available from, I think, last week, going to use the new Defence Committee to do that? But that seems to be an important theme. And are there special or novel challenges because of the nature of technology, AI and the like, which makes it difficult to formulate exactly what the law should state, so you have an exposure draft which can be brought up to date? So that's the first point. The second point is what Commissioner Barrett said yesterday, the use of official information, both regularly and specifically, to combat disinformation. And if I can use an analogy which I learnt as a barrister, candour is not just a duty, it's a weapon. It can be extremely powerful for the government to come out in a matter-of-fact way to say, this has been out there, the true position is this. And the final point, which I've heard from many, many people, is to the NSC, which is don't stop now. And that is in particular with the work which has been done here, treat it as a longitudinal study which should be continued at regular intervals. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor. And that's short and sweet, but I think we'll continue to work with you for advice on these issues. So, look, the last word on the panel is going to go to Tom Rogers. Tom, you helped us kickstart this yesterday, and of course, I'm really delighted that as former Australian Electoral Commissioner and as really the Australian Electoral Commissioner who did so much to bring our democratic resilience into the security picture. You're a key advisor to this project. Over to you, Tom.
Well, look, thank you very much, Rory, and possibly just because I'll be the last speaker, just to thank you and the team for this great report. I'm not sure we'll get the...
Thank you.
Normally, if it was an orchestra, we'd bring them up and we'd be bowing, but I think we're just...
I haven't finished yet.
Right, okay, right. So, look, a couple of observations from the report and from what I've seen the last couple of days. And I think, firstly, the outcome is trust is the system. And we need to think about that very clearly. We need to treat communication, information, elections and our key institutions as part of national security and as critical national security assets. And I think that's what we're seeing from those reports as well. And we need to treat trust as an asset we need to build early, not after an event, and that's what citizens are telling us. Secondly, I think we need to build citizen skills urgently, not just build a state response and a state capability, and we're seeing that in the report. Citizens are concerned about what impacts them on a day-to-day basis. We need to build their skills with digital and media literacy. And then related to that, the final point, I do wonder whether perhaps our national security policy is still built from the border out rather than from the front door out, which is what citizens are thinking. And, on that, and this is not binary, we need an incredibly strong defence force, but we spend billions on defence. And I've just sort of looked before, what we've got in the pipeline at the moment, the News Media Assistance Program, which will build the national media literacy strategy, is out at the moment. It won't be ready for another couple of years, and the total investment available to that is $3.8 million over 3 years.
That's how many cents per citizen?
So
Yeah.
when you look at what citizens are telling us impacts on them, what's coming out of this report, I think the report should give all of us cause for pause and concern about what we're investing in and how we need to think about that for the future. So well done to the team for producing a report that sparks these sorts of conversations, Rory. So.
Look, thank you, Tom. And I think all of you have set us homework. And after a very brief pause, we will get underway. But before we conclude, just a few final thoughts from me. Firstly, in no particular order, I want to note that one of our speakers unfortunately wasn't able to join us over the past 2 days, and we have been in touch with her and her office, and we have a message to pass on. So that was, of course, Janelle Saffin, the Minister for Recovery in the state of New South Wales. Now, this is of great personal interest to me because for me, this whole community consultations has been a bit of a full circle adventure. Janelle is also the local member for Lismore in northern New South Wales, and during our consultations I visited what is my old hometown to see what resilience looks like after some catastrophic disasters, and got a very clear sense of how hard community resilience actually is. So Janelle Saffin, who unfortunately, due to the challenges of party politics and particularly of not getting a parliamentary pair to come and join us in Canberra, sends her apologies, wishes she could have been here, but wanted to emphasise that she and certainly I think other voices in the New South Wales government are very supportive of our focus on the intersection of shocks and the need to support community resilience. I also want to pass on a takeaway from the excellent session we had on community cohesion earlier today, chaired by Lydia Khalil, who's on her way to the airport at the moment. And I think, Yasmin, that goes to some of the themes you were speaking of, the focus on respect that came out of that session, and the focus of respect across Australian society, and in particular a point that was made by one of the speakers in that session who defined Australia as safety, democracy and fairness. I found that one of the most powerful lines from our proceedings. I'm going to stop. You've had a very intense 2 days. Before we go, I do want to ask those members of the National Security College team who played a part in this extraordinary event to stand so that we can see you and how many of you there are, whether that's the National Security College staff or whether it's our advisors. And Tom, you're one of those, but let's see who we've got left still standing. I think quite a lot of you are probably outside at the moment. We had at least 20 or 30 staff running this show. So if you could please give the National Security College team a round of applause, and I'm not going to name all the names or we will be here for another day or two, but just to note, particularly Sal Bulkley, my deputy, this is your swan song. After 2 years being liberated from the Department of Defence, I thank them very much for you, and this is, I think, very much a project that you have led the delivery on, but also other colleagues, particularly Tim Wilford and Andrew Ramsey, who led the Community Consultations project with me. Many others, too many to mention, but we'll send dispatches around presently. I also want to thank the Australian National University because we couldn't be holding this valuable national conversation in this venue without the university making this conversation a priority in alignment with its national mission. And all of our supporters, all of you, thank you again very much for your contribution. At that, I'm going to call it a day and look forward to a continued conversation. Thank you.